Hello and welcome to Dartmouth-Hitchcock's virtual roundtable series, Heads Up Coping Through COVID-19. I'm Audra Burns, and I'm joined today by an incredible panel of experts to talk about part one of a two-part series of our conversation, Overcoming Challenges of Changing Learning Environments. I'm pleased to introduce our panel today. Joining me is John Broderick, Senior Director of External Affairs at Dartmouth-Hitchcock and founder of DH's React Mental Health Awareness Campaign. Hi, John.
How are you, Audra? Great to be here.
Great to have you, John. And also joining us is Dr. Julie Balaban, Child and Adolescent Psychiatrist at Dartmouth-Hitchcock. Hi, Dr. Balaban.
Hi, Audra. Thanks so much for inviting me to participate in this.
Oh, you're so welcome. We're thrilled to have your input on this. And we're also excited to have Frank Edelblut join us. And he is the Commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Education. Welcome, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Audra. Happy to be here.
So let's start with you, Julie. There's been a rise in students struggling with mental health issues since the onset of the pandemic over a year ago. I myself am a parent of two young children, so I know the changes mentally that they've gone through and the struggles that they've had to overcome. So as an adolescent psychiatrist, what mental health concerns have you been seeing with teenagers struggling due to COVID, quarantine, and remote learning?
Well, Audra, in our hospital setting, which is where we see, of course, patients having the most severe difficulty, we're seeing the same thing that we hear being reported across the country, which is a marked increase in kids with severe suicidal behavior or thinking, and also significantly with disordered eating, restrictive eating, and actual eating disorders. And in our outpatient clinic, we're definitely seeing the results of the stress of all of this on both our patients and our families, with a significant increase in depression and anxiety.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's important for parents to know that the struggles, like you said, can be so different, and they can be maybe not necessarily just anxiety or depression, but showing up in eating disorders in different ways. So making sure parents are aware. So thank you for the great work that you're doing to help all of these kids. And John, you know, COVID has caused students who might not have previously struggled with mental health challenge starting to experience symptoms of depression, anxiety, or other, unfamiliar emotions. So what advice do you have for students encountering those feelings for the very first time?
Well, the first thing I would say to them, Audra, is talk about it, normalize it. Talk to your parents or a friend or a school counselor, or perhaps even someone like Dr. Balaban. Any young person feeling that way should understand that it's not unexpected. This has been a really hard time for kids, but kids are pretty resilient too. And so I think they need to have some perspective, which this will end. Things will get back to something they appreciate as being more normal. So it's okay not to feel okay. That's not unusual at these times. It's just not okay to keep it to yourself. And so tell people about it, deal with it, and you will be surprised at the support you get. But I just want kids to know they're not alone when they feel that way, and that talking helps and treatment works. So just don't be afraid to deal with how you're feeling.
Yeah, definitely. And like you just said, talking helps and treatment works. And I think what kids might be surprised about is when they do talk about it, they might actually find that other classmates might be experiencing the same thing, or their inner circle of friends might be having those same feelings. So if they can start sharing it themselves, they might be surprised that they have a group who might be experiencing it, and then they can really, help each other. So thank you for that advice. That's a great tip for parents, to encourage their students to talk about it as well. So Frank, let's talk about what resources, teachers, guidance counselors, and school administrators provide to families as the school year wraps up and as we're looking towards summer.
Yeah, so at the department, throughout the pandemic, we've been offering a lot of resources, not even from the teachers out to the parents, but really even just support our educators as well. So through our Bureau of Student Wellness, we have had weekly presentations that we've recorded on all kinds of topics that will equip our educators to be better able to support their families and the students that they're working with. And I think, John, it was interesting, you pointed out a return to normalcy. one of the programs that we are working on here at the Department of Education is we're calling it Rekindle Curiosity. And I apologize, I'm losing my voice at the end of the day here. But Rekindle Curiosity is really an opportunity for every kid to go to camp. So what we really think is one of the things that's going to help the mental and behavioral health of our students is that return to normalcy, to give them the opportunity to be able to go out, walk on in the grass, climb a tree, skin their knee, do something fun, get together with their friends and just enjoy some time together. And so those are the kinds of resources and programming that we want to continue to move forward to really help our kids feel like they're returning to a normal childhood again.
That's excellent to hear. And when you have more information to share, we'll be sure to link the information to your website on this resource for our video. And it's so great, as a parent of 2 boys, to know that there's active involvement of how we're trying to help get our kids outside and remind our parents that that's a necessary time. Let's get them active. Let's get them out there. And great work to you and all of the educators in the state of New Hampshire and beyond for their tremendous amount of what they've had to do and handle and adjust to. And thanks for all the support that you've been giving them. So Julie, parents might be struggling to figure out how to help their teens navigate both, the changing learning environments, but also their teens' mental health struggles. So what advice do you have for parents that are trying to help their teenagers?
So I think first I would say acknowledge the hard times and the bad stuff. As John said, it's so important to open up and to talk about the struggles as a way of getting help. And I think that just as parents often try to protect their children are trying to protect them as well, and are often reluctant to talk about what's going on. So if parents can acknowledge, that they've been having hard times as well, and how difficult they recognize that this has been for their child, I think it models being able to talk about it and encourages the kids to open up, and is a great way to start having a conversation about how it might have been affecting their child as well. And then I would say after that is to be sure to identify the good stuff. We've talked a little bit about resiliency of children, and I think that there must be for every family some things that went well during this very difficult time, and it can get lost in all the trauma of all the hard times. But I think acknowledging what went well and acknowledging the child's role in that, like how much we appreciate that they stepped up to the plate and helped out with babysitting their younger sibling while we were working on video, for example. I think that can be really important. And for some of the things that came out of this year of being stuck together in the house, there were actually some nice routines, I think, that could be kept going forward. So having a family conversation about that, whether it's family reunions on Zoom and talking to, family members from across the country that normally one wouldn't have. And then adding some joy back into life, adding some pleasure back in. One of the things that happens when people have been under stress for a long time is that it can be hard to feel joyful again. And so I think really purposefully building some joy back in and maybe into some of the new routines. So as the weather is getting warmer, maybe one meal a week that's all together should be outside. Breakfast as a picnic in the front yard, perhaps. Ice cream for dinner on the really warm days. Families doing things outside together instead of just inside. So maybe a weekly or a monthly hike or bike ride together. I know a lot of families were doing family game nights as one way of passing the time when they were inside. Well, now that it's nice, go outside and maybe even incorporate, neighbors. We can't do contact sports yet, but, a friendly game of horse or a friendly competition like that can be done in a safe and social and physically distant way. So I think there are a lot of things that could help.
I think that's really great advice. And the one thing that sticks with me of what you said was about acknowledging positive things that might have happened within your family routine, whether it's you got to have lunch with your kids or you got to see them, in the morning instead of them rushing off to a bus. I think that's important, that there was the struggles, but also take that opportunity to acknowledge what might have been a positive thing for this. So that's great advice. And I'm going to write down that you said I can have ice cream for dinner with my kids, and they'll love that. So I'm making note of that. So John, students have experienced a lot of change in their learning environment, from remote learning to hybrid learning, and now pretty soon all kids will be back full-time learning. So these changes can be very anxious, they can cause anxious thoughts and overwhelming feelings. So what can students do now to make the transition easier for them mentally?
Well, my advice, other than having ice cream for dinner, I like to have myself, by the way, doctor. I'll join you that night. I want to just say this generation of young people, I've been to so many high schools. The commissioner's been with me many times. I love this generation of kids. They're really remarkable. And I admire them at so many levels. And I know it's been a hard time for them. And when people go back to routines again, ones they haven't really been in a long time, it's hard to adjust for some kids. Some kids will adjust very well. It won't be as difficult, but some will have a hard time adjusting. And so my advice to kids is to be patient with yourself. If you're having trouble getting back to that level that you were before you started studying remotely, it's okay. Teachers understand that. Your parents should understand that. And so the school will understand it. So just don't be too hard on yourself. And also to watch out for your friends. This generation, by the way, is just amazingly open. I love that about them. And they're not afraid to reach out and help their friends who are struggling. So there may be some significant adjustment for some kids. It's okay. Eventually, you'll get back to something that feels like normal. So take the pressure off yourself. I think, the commissioner's idea about what amounts to like a summer camp experience is wonderful for kids. I hate to see them stuck in the classroom all summer long. They need to get out and experience life again. And they are young people. They're going to grow up, they'll be fine. But they need to know right now that they have everyone's support as they are adjusting. I think that's important. I think it's important for parents to realize that. And it may actually be important for school administrators to send a note home to parents saying, don't be surprised if, so that no one's going to be in a non-supportive role. So I think we'll get back to normal. It'll be an adjustment for some, but it's coming and it will happen.
Yep. I think it's going to be adjustment, but like you said, it's managing those expectations of what the transition might be like, and that it's okay that it's going to be a little bumpy at times, but that's what it's going to be like for everyone. So Julie, let's talk about that fact that it can be exhausting to be on camera all day long, not only for, teachers, students, parents, pretty much everyone who lives their world now on video. So it can also feel socially isolating and lonely for kids. So how can students navigate those feelings, and what can they do to feel more connected with both their classmates and their friends?
Yeah, I think that one thing we have to keep in mind is that this generation is much more used to connecting in lots of different ways, more so than our generations are. We had letters, in person, and talking on the telephone. They have all of that, and texting and social media and everything else. So I think that the video connections that they make is just another kind of connection, and probably for them was easier than it's been for the rest of us to do. But I do think that having physical connection is important. Even just being in the same room with somebody is different than being on a video chat with them. So I think for those kids who are going back to school, that even just that alone will be a really nice increase in their feeling of connection. And I will just add to something that John said about the transition. Some things will be difficult. And in particular, what I'm hearing might be difficult is remembering that you can't wear pajama bottoms to school anymore, because now your bottoms will be visible. So to keep that in mind.
Yep, that's a really great point.
I think also as the weather gets better, kids are going to be outside and hanging out with each other, and that certainly is going to be, a nice way for them to spend more time together. But I think also the point that John made about reaching out to their peers about this experience. What we always heard from people who were, say, in the military together is that it's a bonding experience like no other. When you've been through a war together, you build such close relationships with each other. And this is quite an experience we've all been through. And I think it can be a very bonding experience as we move through it and come out to the other side of it.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about the bonding experience, you spoke earlier about, the kids who are used to this with cameras and technology, and how great is it that they really helped their grandparents or their great grandparents get online so they could have those conversations. I mean, that was a blessing that kind of came out of this, because when else would they might not have agreed to want to do video chat with their grandkid because, oh, I'll see them next weekend. But now they have that technology set up. So that's, another benefit that came from this for sure. So Frank, although some kids are struggling, as we mentioned, about the changes caused by COVID, there are also kids who have been doing pretty okay and kind of made that adjustment, which, reminds us to look about the silver lining in these situations. So what stories have you heard from teachers or families that have brought hope to you over the past year?
So there have been a number of silver linings, although I think that Julie may have scored with one of the best ones. There are school-aged children across the state who now have permission to have ice cream for dinner. And so I think they're going to be leaning in on that as well. It's interesting, just the other night I was at an event and there were some parents there and we were talking about the impact on schooling and how they were coping. And this one mom who was just reflecting on how difficult the circumstances were, she almost paused in the middle of her dialogue and just said, but you know what? It's been a great year. I got to spend a lot of time with my children that I would not otherwise have had the opportunity to do. So, I mean, if nothing else, there is that opportunity that has presented itself. So, families across the state, Audrey, you pointed out, and I've heard this from other families as well, you don't have to rush those kids out of the house at 7:05 in the morning to get them onto the next bus, right? You get to pause for a moment, share a little bit of breakfast and find out what's going on in their lives. And I think that those are moments that really we should all kind of latch onto and really appreciate throughout that process. I think as well, there's been opportunity for the education system as well. We've learned a tremendous amount of things. Like this pushed everyone so far outside of their comfort zone that we don't even know what comfort is anymore. And that might be okay because we're willing to try new things, to tackle new things, to explore, to see what might happen. And that applies really to the students as well as the educators throughout the system. So there's a lot of opportunity for advancement in terms of how we go about doing school into the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think kind of the overall theme that you all kind of touched upon at some point during this conversation was that, these students are resilient, and encouraging them to really speak about, any concerns that they have, reach out to their friends, because John, like you said, is an incredible generation and they want to support each other, but they also need to feel comfortable speaking up. So what we can do as parents and educators and family members is just encourage that dialogue. So thank you all so much for joining me today, Julie, John, and Frank. This was a really great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next week, we're going to talk about part 2 of this conversation with a focus on high school students' perspective of overcoming these challenges. You can view past Heads Up Coping Through COVID-19 on our website and the Dartmouth-Hitchcock YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. Take care.